The 1980s. Pop culture was different then, and there's a reason why so many romanticize it today. It was a time of technological innovation and economic expansion. Entertainment felt fresh rather than rehashed. Brand new iconic movie franchises were crafted like Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, and Back to the Future. Music entered an all-new era with the birth of MTV. Fashion was bright and colorful, if not often a little tacky. And in the US, the infant gaming industry rose, then fell, and eventually rose again. But in Great Britain, that gaming landscape looked very different. Game consoles like Atari and NES did exist, sure, but they were much less prevalent and took a back seat to the home computer. But maybe not the pricey computers you might think of like the Apple II. No, Great Britain's computer industry was largely dominated by companies like Sinclair and Acorn, with their low-cost machines like the Sinclair Spectrum or the BBC Micro. It was in this landscape that the young would-be programmer, Jon Burton, first encountered Commodore's VIC-20 computer and developed an interest in video games. Burton's uncle owned the PC, and during a visit with his family to his uncle's home, Burton would get a chance to toy with the device.
I typed in one of the basic programs from the back of the manual, and the computer made the sound of a UFO landing. I was hooked. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
This experience was profound enough for Jon that he would go on to purchase his own hardware, the aforementioned Sinclair Spectrum. While game development in those days certainly wasn't easy, it was much more straightforward, and computers like the Spectrum made an accessible hobby to the general public. Burton would spend his free time typing away in his bedroom, coding his own game programs in BASIC, and as he went, he would learn other programming languages like Forth and Assembler. In 1984, a British game publisher known as Telecomsoft, owned and operated by British Telecom, was founded, and would go on to set up multiple publishing labels. The goal of this venture was to set up a software publishing empire on the same scale as companies like Penguin Books. Accomplishing a feat of that magnitude, though, was no simple task. At the start, the company intended to use the name Firefly Software as their main label, but it would later have to be renamed because this was already taken. In an attempt to fulfill their lofty goal, an ad was published in various newspapers and magazines in order to recruit talent.
Turning a great idea into a profitable idea isn't easy. It needs skill, patience, and sheer hard work. But to really be profitable, it also needs the backing of a large respected company. At British Telecom, we are now looking for writers of games and educational programs to help us launch a new and exciting range of software. If we like your idea, we'll send you a check straight away as an advance on royalties. Then, we'll package your programs, advertise it, and distribute it with the care and attention you'd expect from one of Britain's biggest companies.
This ad would bring in programmer Tony Rainbird, the namesake of what Telecom would now dub FireBird, rather than Firefly, and other various employees. But that didn't mean they were done soliciting outside freelancers and hobbyists to send them games. Once the new logo was finalized, a new ad would be sent out via satellite all over Europe, which was apparently the first time this had ever been done in that region. This ad showcased the new FireBird logo and included more complete info about what they wanted out of software, as well as where the game should be sent. This plan worked tremendously, and programmers of all ages from all over Europe sent in their projects in an attempt to make their mark and a little bit of money. It was in the midst of this campaign that Jon Burton would attempt to get several of his many titles published, the first of which was Gup. Burton wrote this game when he was only about 15 years old. There was also his side-scrolling vehicle platformer, Turbo 2, Daedalus, his vertical shoot-'em-up, and Thingamy, which Burton would describe as, quote, like Lemmings, but with one character instead of hundreds, unquote, which he considered years ahead of its time. Unfortunately, FireBird would not accept any of these games, and Burton would continue to long for the recognition of his work and his talent.
It is the best machine that is around anywhere in the world.
The professional machine of the future.
By the mid-80s, Burton had shifted his focus to the more advanced 16-bit Commodore Amiga hardware. The Amiga wasn't just a new toy for him to play with either. In retrospect, it was the ticket to his incredibly successful future, and it all began when Burton got sucked into the Amiga demo scene.
Makes it possible. Only Amiga makes it happen.
The demo scene was a community of programmers, artists, and often hackers that would push the Amiga to its limits and showcase what it was capable of, typically through animations and music that they inserted into cracked software. The whole concept kinda gives off the vibe of an underground group of rebels breaking all the rules, but the reality is they were just nerds like us, messing around with their talents to make something they thought was neat. Jon Burton was fascinated with this world, and he ended up getting involved by writing his own Amiga demos to show off what he could do.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
Only Amiga.
On Burton's YouTube channel today, he showcases multiple examples of demos that he made while a part of different hacking groups, such as Blitting Image or SAE, which stood for Share and Enjoy. There was Wild Tremolo, which was a parody he made of a more well-known demo, Son of Tremolo, which was made for an internal group contest between his friends, Tremolo Goes to Pieces, which feels like it's trying to send me into a seizure with how chaotic it is, and there were several others.
This is it.
These demos teach us a lot about his demo scene days, such as the fact that he apparently went by the moniker Tremolo in these online circles. After several months of involvement in the Amiga demo scene, Burton would meet a freelance artist named Andy Ingram. The two were fast friends, and they decided it was a good idea to combine their talents and make an Amiga game together that publishers wouldn't be able to ignore, like they had done to Burton in the past. Once they had created a very basic, rough draft version of the first level of this new game, Burton and Ingram would bring it to British gaming publisher Psygnosis in an attempt to get some advice and guidance on how to continue with development. Psygnosis was very well known for their Amiga titles, which were also available on other various systems, so this was the two amateur developers' way of calling in the experts, so to speak. How Psygnosis responded, though, was nothing short of shocking. Psygnosis wanted to publish the duo's game. It is unclear exactly why they made this decision, but one can assume they were impressed with the work. Psygnosis would now fund them, as well as provide any development resources they might need, like PCs or later on dev kits. This was the opportunity they needed to break into the industry, and they didn't waste it. Together with many of their demo scene friends, Burton and Ingram would then form their new game development company, Traveler's Tales, in order to continue work on their game under more professional terms. After 18 months, Leander was finally ready to release to the world of Amiga, and the game's reception led to a Mega Drive port a year later. Leander is often compared to hack-and-slash games like Shadow of the Beast, and when you look at the two side by side, it's not hard to see why. While Burton enjoyed creating the game at the time, he doesn't care much for it today, largely because his focus was split during production.
I wrote a lot of it while finishing my work placement and degree at Liverpool. It was a lot of fun writing the game, but I don't really have much fondness for it as such. Not sure why. It was technically and artistically fantastic for the time, but the gameplay was pretty generic and repetitive. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
Even if Burton didn't love the game they had created, British gamers had more favorable opinions. Leander proved popular, and the name Traveler's Tales started to get around the world of gaming. They were now, by all accounts, a development company to pay attention to. The Amiga had opened the door to success for them, and now they had a well-established relationship with one of the region's biggest publishers. In fact, Psygnosis trusted Traveler's Tales enough that they went on to give them a big project that another group Psygnosis had tried to work with had failed on. Much like Traveler's Tales, this other group, Dionysus, was from the Amiga demo scene. One of their demos, Pugs in Space, reportedly impressed leadership at Psygnosis so much that the publisher approached Dionysus and asked them to make a fully fledged game using the demo's lead character, a goofy-looking little red alien with a big nose named Pugsy. I'm sure Dionysus were initially thrilled to get to make a game and get paid to do it, but ultimately the project turned out to be too much for the team, and they dropped out of the deal. Psygnosis must have retained the rights to the character, however, and when things fell through, they approached Traveler's Tales with the property.
I think it was a bit beyond the guys who created the demo, so in the end, Psygnosis asked us if we could create a game using the character. The only thing really retained from the demo was the design of the main character. However, he was red in the demo, and we changed him to orange as the console would suffer from color bleed from the color red. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
Traveler's Tales' iteration of the game would become a physics-based puzzle platformer that took its inspiration from the Big N.
I loved Super Mario World on the SNES, and loved the fact that you could pick up and throw the springs and the turtles. I thought there was loads of potential with taking that a lot further. So, I set out to try and create a Super Mario World type game, but with all the puzzles being based on lots of physics objects, and them all having loads of different properties like buoyancy, weight, friction, etc. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
It's not terribly surprising that these mechanics from Super Mario World inspired developers like Burton back then, seeing as those same mechanics would form the basis of some of the best levels in Super Mario Maker decades later. Pugsy would release in 1993 on the Amiga and Sega's Mega Drive, and while it was well received, it sold poorly overall. Their next game would lead to the largest expansion as a company that Traveler's Tales had seen yet. At this point, Psygnosis was about to be purchased by Sony, and the buyout process had already begun. Because of this, Sony had tasked the publisher to get a movie tie-in made for their film Bram Stoker's Dracula. Psygnosis once again gave the project to Traveler's Tales.
We got a reasonable advance for the game so we could get an office and start hiring up people. Bram Stoker's Dracula really paid to get us working at a more professional level. Up until then, it had literally been back bedroom stuff. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
The game, while solid, wasn't exactly anything to write home about, but even still, their work stood out to leadership at Sony. Sony reached out to Traveler's Tales directly to see what they could do with a game centered around Mickey Mouse, which Sony had just recently gotten the rights to work with.
Sony ImageSoft had pitched an idea to Disney for a Mickey Mouse game, originally to tie in with his 65th birthday. The problem was that the pitch to Disney was hugely ambitious and had no basis in the reality of what technology could achieve. We created a couple of demo levels for Disney which they thought were running on the Mega CD, but actually were just running on a basic Mega Drive. This impressed them so much that we got to make the game for them. Once we had gained creative control of the design of the game, we ended up with what I think is one of our best games to date. One cool thing is that if you lost a life in the game, a short sequence would play showing Mickey Mouse holding up a lily and dying. That seemed fine at the time, but we later learned that this is the only time that Mickey Mouse has been depicted as dead. We killed Mickey Mouse. Maybe we should get t-shirts made. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
Shortly after Mickey Mania released in 1994, they would also release a Sega CD version. Both versions showed how well Traveler's Tales understood Sega's technology. They continued to work with Disney, creating a game based on the first Toy Story movie for Buena Vista Games. It was released in 1995 on the exact same day as the movie, which was the first time a movie tie-in game had released day and date with its film counterpart. This 2D platformer did some technically impressive things for the Genesis and SNES hardware it released on. I don't have plans to discuss this Toy Story game in depth today, but if enough people are interested, I may circle back around to it in the future and make a dedicated review video. The work Traveler's Tales had done on the Genesis over the last few years had apparently caught the attention of the platform holder Sega. Their games had been widely regarded as technically impressive, and as Sega struggled to transition to their new Saturn hardware, a technically impressive Genesis game was exactly what they needed. Sega approached Traveler's Tales with a huge proposition for this new Genesis game, and while Burton and the team had no desire to continue working on the aging hardware, it was the kind of offer they just couldn't refuse.
Sega approached us and said they wanted us to create a new Mega Drive game. We said that we didn't want to work on the last generation of machines anymore. They said that the game they wanted us to work on was Sonic. We told them how much we loved working on the last generation of machines. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
The subsequent game they created was known as Sonic 3D Blast in the West, while the name in Japan and Europe, where the game was developed, was Sonic 3D Flicky's Island. I guess we don't like the word flicky over here in America. Sega's Sonic team had basically already developed the entire game themselves conceptually, but they were too busy working on their big Saturn debut, Nights into Dreams, to execute on the vision and create 3D Blast themselves. Their other upcoming project, Sonic Extreme, was also nowhere close to completion, and as Sonic was their mascot, they felt like they needed to fill that void. That's where Traveler's Tales came in.
They came to us with the game kind of fully formed. They wanted us to do this isometric 3D style. They'd seen what we'd done on Mickey Mania and Toy Story and wanted to see if we could pull off this isometric view. I guess at the time, they were maybe struggling with Sonic Extreme, maybe it was in very early development. There wasn't a Sonic game around, and they obviously wanted to embrace 3D and the next generation. Mario was about to come out, or had just come out. They wanted to be in the world of 3D. They didn't want just another 2D side-scroller, but they also wanted to support the Genesis, which couldn't do true 3D. I guess this was the compromise they came up with, but they were clear on it being isometric 3D. I had some pretty clear ideas on how we'd be able to do that. Jon Burton, VentureBeat.com, November 22nd, 2017.
The game was mostly well received at the time, though many look back at it today with a bit less reverence. Having the first quote-unquote 3D Sonic game released on a platform that couldn't even accomplish true 3D gameplay has proven to be a controversial decision. That, and Sonic couldn't really go fast in this title, because of the hardware limitations. According to Burton, the Genesis couldn't scroll the screen fast enough while using the isometric 3D gameplay style to make it truly feel like a Sonic game. Sega was perfectly happy with the final product though, and ported 3D Blast to the Saturn a couple months after the initial Genesis release to get the most out of Traveler's Tales' efforts that they could, and to make up for the fact that they had just cancelled Sonic Extreme altogether. The Saturn generation was a tumultuous one for Sega from the very beginning, especially in the US. Sega of America's president Tom Kalinske had made some rather poor decisions during the console's launch, and that's putting it mildly. Sonic Extreme's cancellation only underscored the disarray of the company. To combat the rising tensions, Sega came back to Traveler's Tales again to have them make another Sonic spin-off, a racing game, which would later become Sonic R. The team at Traveler's Tales had already been working on a Formula 1 racing engine and game at the time, and Sega just so happened to ask them to make a racing game specifically. This was obviously no coincidence, and Tails Doll's demonic influence must have been involved. Much like 3D Blast, the designs, tracks, and conceptual ideas were mainly developed by Sonic Team, who would then pass them along to be brought to life by Traveler's Tales. Sonic Team's ideas for the game were a bit more unconventional than other racing titles at the time.
Sonic Team wanted to expand the race game into a cross between a race game and a platform adventure game. We developed the 3D engine to allow players to roam freely and ended up with an engine that would happily support a platform game such as Mario 64 if needed. Jon Burton, Official Sega Saturn Magazine, Issue 24, October 1997.
The result of Sonic Team's ideas for the title created one of the most controversial racing games to date. While the music is interesting, arguably good, the open nature of the gameplay created more confusing chaos than enjoyment. What I find funny about this is that Burton would imply that their game was somehow superior to Mario Kart 64 in that same oddly stiff Saturn Magazine interview.
I was disappointed in Mario Kart 64. There are probably loads of hidden features and tracks, but I couldn't find any. Considering the power of the N64, I felt the game was graphically weak. Jon Burton, Official Sega Saturn Magazine, Issue 24, October 1997.
Sure, it's been argued many times that in terms of the amount of content and the lack of unlockables, Mario Kart 64 could have been better. But I think that the quality and fun in the game far surpasses Sonic R's. I loved the graphics of Mario Kart 64 growing up, and while they are sprite-based, I think they've aged far better than the janky polygon style, even if I do enjoy that style as well. Sonic R's reception was pretty poor at the time, and is arguably worse today. My personal guess is that most people only really look back at it fondly for the music. I wouldn't necessarily pin the blame for the quality of the game on Burton's team though, considering any game tied to Sonic Team tends to have a reputation for jank. After their 2-year stint working closely with Sega, Traveler's Tales returned to Disney to work on 2 more Pixar titles, both of which I played quite a bit growing up. A Bug's Life, which was released in 1998, and then our marquee title for today's video, Toy Story 2: Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Or Disney Pixar's action game Toy Story 2 if you're a part of the PC Master Race. Seeing as Traveler's Tales were already known for their work on the widely successful game for the first Toy Story movie, it only made sense for the new publisher, Activision, to bring them back for the sequel. This game, especially the N64 port, is incredibly special to me personally. And while there isn't much to say about this game's development specifically, it's the game that led me to research Traveler's Tales' story and make this video in the first place. As such, let's take a closer look. The N64 version of Toy Story 2: Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue opens with a very basic title screen and some rudimentary menus. Nothing to write home about, but I wouldn't say they're unpleasant, especially if you enjoy the game's version of You've Got a Friend in Me that plays in the background. That's one big difference in the N64 version versus other ports. As many people are well aware, because of Nintendo's choice to use cartridges over CD-ROM technology, compromises almost always had to be made. In this game, one of those compromises was in the music. The tracks are very different and much more compressed. For example, let's compare the N64 menu music to the PS1's. There's not as many instruments or layers to the sound. The PS1 sounds almost orchestrated, while the N64 is much more MIDI. It's not as clear and crisp on the N64, and it's obvious why so many people think this version is inferior. Music in general was always harder for developers on N64 because the console didn't have its own sound chip. Personally though, I kinda like the N64 version's music a little bit better in some ways. Look, I get it, I'm nostalgia blind here. In fact, I put on my rose-tinted glasses just before starting this video. I grew up listening to the crappier music, so of course I prefer it. But it's not just the quality I'm taking into consideration here. Because of the limited cartridge space, this version actually has less tracks overall. Of course that sounds like a bad thing on paper, but when I boot up this game and go into the first level, I love hearing You've Got a Friend in Me from the menu and into the opening area. In the other versions, this first level uses an entirely different track that just doesn't really fit in my mind. It's not a bad track, it just doesn't match the theme of exploring Andy's house to me. I don't know, I guess I'm just a dumb hipster. Alright, let's just get into the game, you can crucify me later. When starting a new game, all we have to do is select Play Game, and it will throw us right in. Rather than an explorable hub world, Toy Story 2 uses an animated selection screen that shows you a sketchy diorama model of the locations you're about to explore, while goofy sound effects play in the background, like a vacuum cleaner or toilet flush in the case of level 1. It's all designed to look like it was drawn on an Etch-a-Sketch, and it's incredibly charming. So, naturally, we start out at Andy's house. As we begin, we get a slideshow of captioned stills from the movie explaining the story. This is another reason why people hate this version of the game, because the other ports have full motion cutscenes. Yet again though, I don't mind this compromise so much, mostly because I'm perfectly content quietly reading what's going on, rather than getting ear-raped by these poorly audio-balanced scenes that jump scare me every single time. I'm sure everyone knows the story at this point though. During a rescue mission, Woody is stolen by Al, a greedy toy collector who has been searching for a Woody doll for years. Buzz makes a futile attempt to rescue his plastic cowboy friend, but to no avail. And now we're set free in Andy's bedroom, and it's time to explore. The main goal of the game, and the way you progress forward, is a little bit like Super Mario 64. You complete various tasks and challenges to collect something called Pizza Planet tokens. These would be the equivalent of a Power Star in Mario. In each level there are 5 to collect, and you need a certain total amount to reach further locations. Why does Buzz need these tokens to progress forward? Don't ask. The game doesn't exactly tell you where to go or what to do after setting you loose, so how could you possibly know what these challenges are or where to find them? Granted, the area isn't huge, so you could easily figure it out by exploring, but if you need a little extra help, you might hear the painful screeching of a certain green dinosaur on the same level of the house. Buzz! Buzz! Rex will give you a hint on how to find and complete each of the 5 tokens. In later levels, finding him can get tricky, but it's never impossible with a little bit of exploration. Speaking of hints, if you ever have trouble figuring out how things work, Andy's house is full of these Rex hint boxes that will explain the different mechanics of the game. Fall into the crib and aren't sure how to shoot the latches on the gate to get out? This box explains how you can go into first-person mode and lock onto the latches and shoot them with perfect precision. Don't understand why there's a big X on this chair cushion? This box explains how to ground pound it and get launched across the room to a high-up bookshelf. You can collect any of the tokens in a level in any order, so it's totally up to you where to go. In Andy's room, you'll find a few enemies that you can destroy with Buzz's laser attack, which I thought was a light bulb, but hey, I'll suspend my disbelief. If you start down the hall to the right after leaving Andy's room, you'll see a string hanging down over Rex that will take us up to the attic. Here you'll find a foreboding tin robot boss that you'll need to eliminate. To do this, you'll enter the arena of boxes and run around in circles until the robot needs to wind back up. This is your chance to attack, since your lasers will bounce off of his metal exterior when he's moving around. Your normal red laser attack won't do much to this metal monstrosity, however, but if you hold down the attack button, you'll charge up a much more powerful green colored beam that can kill smaller enemies in a single hit or take out a third of this boss's health. So while you're running around wearing out the robot, you'll want to hold down the attack button at the exact same time to charge up. After a few hits, this robot will explode and leave behind a token for you to collect. If this fight is somehow too hard for you though, you can save it for later and collect this power up in another room that will make all of your normal laser blasts the powerful charge blast. This basically turns the game into easy mode until it runs out from extended use. You can keep track of how much more of the power up you have with this green meter in the bottom right corner. When we head downstairs, you'll probably immediately notice a dog door opening to your left. If we head in here, we find ourselves in the garage, and on the other side of the family car, RC is waiting to race us. It doesn't exactly seem fair, considering we're on foot and he's a literal car, but oh well. If you manage to stay ahead of him for 3 painfully slow laps around the garage, we get another token, and RC will spin around in a fit of rage at his obvious lack of skill. Loser. Out in the main living room, Ham is waiting for us on the couch. He'll give us a token in exchange for 50 of these coins that you'll find everywhere. Even the enemies drop them when they die. So as you explore, make sure you're grabbing as many coins as possible to complete this challenge. Behind the couch with Ham, you'll find another door with a staircase leading down to the basement. After flinging yourself down the staircase, you might be taken off guard by the layer of green sludge that's covering most of the floor down here. Based on the tipped over cans, we can assume some kind of chemical was spilled, though what chemical and spilled by who is anyone's guess. Still waiting for the game theory on that one, MatPat. I don't care if you've retired. All that really matters is that it hurts to the touch. So how do we get around this massive puddle of goo? Well, in reality, we could just jump right in, take a couple points of damage, and make it to this big wooden pallet with barely a scratch. But let's pretend that this challenge was designed just a little bit better, and we had to get through without taking damage. That's where Mr. Spudhead over here comes in. In many levels, you'll find Potato Man hanging out somewhere near a box with a new power-up inside. Rather than letting you use it to save Woody out of the kindness of his starchy heart, he'll only grant you access after you find one of his missing body parts hidden somewhere in the level. In Andy's house, he's missing an ear. If you haven't already come across it during your exploring, it can be found on top of the bookshelves in the living room, which you get to by ground pounding this chair as mentioned before. Once he has his precious ear, we unlock what the game calls the Cosmic Shield. It helps us to not take damage for a short period of time. So now we can cross the slimy ocean without any stress. The one caveat though is that while the shield is active, we can't jump more than a centimeter off the ground. The only real issue I have with this is that there's no way to turn it off early, and crossing the green liquid takes way less time than the shield gives you. So once you cross, you'll be waiting 5 seconds, give or take, before you can continue forward. Obviously, a few seconds aren't going to cause that much grief in the grand scheme of things, but it's still pretty annoying that I have to stop for such an arbitrary reason. That probably could have been easily solved if they had let us turn it off by pressing a button. I would rather take a little bit of damage to keep up the fluidity of movement than use the clunky power-up. And maybe that says something about the generation that people claim I'm a part of, but I don't care. I want to go fast. After getting to the wooden pallet, the game wants you to do some somewhat more complex platforming using these boxes, shelves, and light fixtures to get to this ledge with pushable boxes. As a kid though, my depth perception was rough. And when you mix that with the jankiness of the N64 joystick, it made some of the more precision jumps difficult. Because of this, I would try a much more tedious and difficult to pull off route that I had come up with at the time. That being said, I'm sure everyone else has attempted this as well, and I wasn't exactly a groundbreaking genius. On the pallet, there are these nails jutting out all over, and if you jump at one at just the right angle, you can leap off of it and grab onto the side of the shelf and skip the other shelves entirely. You know what? I take it back. I'm a speedrunning prodigy. Once you do finally make it to the ledge, it's only a matter of pushing the boxes into place and climbing up to get the Pizza Planet token above. Finally, the last token in this level is one that you'll ideally have been working towards this entire time. On the ground floor and down the hall, you'll find the kitchen, and Bo Peep is hanging out on the table shouting for help. She needs you to find her 5 sheep that are strewn throughout the level in each of the main rooms besides the bedroom you started in. There's one in the rafters of the attic, one up on a shelf in the garage, one on another shelf in the living room, one on another shelf in the basement, and finally one on the cabinet in the kitchen itself. You might have to backtrack a little if you didn't notice them initially, but at least this level is pretty small overall. Each time that you collect a Pizza Planet token, the game will ask if you want to exit the level. Once you have all the tokens and the potato head item, there's no real reason to really stay, so you're safe to select this option. Once you do, Buzz will shout his signature catchphrase and leap into the air as if flying away. If you do need to leave without collecting a token, or you accidentally say no when it asks you to leave, you can still end the level by pausing and hitting that same exit level text. At the end of each level, you'll see a final status screen that marks off each task you've completed, and leaves things that you still need to do blank. It also shows you how many coins you've collected that particular time through. In the N64 version I played growing up, this screen just had nondescript token icons that wouldn't give you any hints as to which challenge was what. But in later builds of the game, there would be some sort of image depicting what the token was for, such as a little icon of a boss or collectible item. It's a small change, but it makes the game less difficult for younger gamers for sure. After conquering Andy's house, it's time to move on to Andy's neighborhood. This level starts you out in the corner of a yard, which I can only assume to be Andy's, filled with molehills. Oh, and there's also a giant sentient murderous lawnmower that you'll need to avoid. The Toy Story universe just got way more terrifying. Even the lawn care tools are alive. Apparently when my cousin Plaidley and I were kids, he had been over and we were playing this game together, and I just blatantly lied to his face that if you did a super secret cheat hack, you could ride the lawnmower around the level.
Oh boy, I have no idea where all of the soldiers. I want to over here. Do you have to pound on these things? I heard if you pound on all these things in like a limited amount of time, you can ride the lawnmower or something. Maybe that was just a. Maybe my cousin Titus was just teeting. Maybe it was just teeting.
I have absolutely no memory of this, but it sounds like something I would do, so. Sarge is hanging out on the steps of the house in this yard, waiting for you to find 5 of his missing troops strewn throughout the level, similar to the sheep you collected before. Most of the little challenges you'll encounter in this level are just to find these plastic army men. For example, you'll need to stomp the aforementioned molehills at the right moment to magically make smoke come out of them and force an army man out of the tunnel below. In this other yard, you'll have to launch yourself from this beat-up old car into a washing machine, then push a plank down to get to the laundry line, and make some well-timed leaps from line to line dodging clothes to get to this soldier in the basket. Then in this yard, you'll have to jump from trees and other objects around the perimeter of the pool until you can use these flags that make it look like the family that lives here is giving up. You'll have to swing from flag to flag to get the plastic troop at the end. And then you jump on a swing set. But then you climb a little bit higher into the tree after jumping on the swing set. One of the other tokens can be found high above the pool we saw before, and to get to it, you'll have to jump on this pump over and over to inflate the duck floaty that will fly into the pool at just the right spot for you to ground pound it and hop up to collect the token. Question? If all toys are sentient in this world, did we just give birth? RC can be found around the center of the map, and he'll challenge Buzz to another race. The thing is, under normal circumstances, he's too fast, and you're meant to lose to him without another one of these boxed up power-ups, the rocket boots. But they can't be unlocked in this level because the French fry man isn't anywhere to be found. In fact, this item can't be unlocked for another 5 levels or so. Traveler's Tales wants you to have to backtrack to this level later on in the game. But as I only just discovered by accident recently, there's a different pro gamer strat to get this token and complete the level now. If you can stay in front of RC throughout the race and have him bump into your back over and over, he'll slow down from his collision animation, leaving you plenty of room to stay ahead of him and finish the race victorious if you don't let him pass you. I never knew this was possible until I recorded footage for this video and had him bump into me by accident. My mind was blown. But again, it's not a groundbreaking discovery. After a few seconds of research, I realized that people have been using this strategy for years, and somehow I just never knew about it. But now I can use it in my epic world record speedrun! Speedrunning! To get to the boss battle of Andy's neighborhood, you'll have to climb the big old tree up to the very top, destroying enemies, dodging falling green sludge, and completing some tricky platforming along the way. Oh, and we also can't forget that Ham is in this tree, waiting for his hush money. When you finally make it to the top, there's a big wooden treehouse platform where the Zurg kite boss is ruling over his suburban kingdom. Defeating the kite is probably more difficult than the robot we faced before, especially because if you're knocked off the platform, you have to climb the entire tree all over again, and then start the fight over. Sure, there's a rope that you can pull down at a point to give you a shortcut to skip some of the tree, but it doesn't take you past the most difficult jumps, and it also takes forever, so it's not the most helpful. Damaging the Zurg kite is also not as straightforward if you don't know exactly what you're doing. He'll float around the platform for a while before swooping down and spinning around to attack you. When he is attacking, he's seemingly invulnerable to your laser beams, but when he's high up above you waiting to pounce, he can be hurt. Going into first person mode to line up the shot more precisely can be annoying because he'll strafe back and forth, and even when you lock on, it's easy to miss. Ideally, the player will come into this fight with another laser power up. This way, the fire button doesn't have to be held down while we try to aim. The actual best way to defeat the kite is to forego aiming altogether and jump up as he's done attacking and shoot him. It's not hard to hit him this way 3 times and finish the winged beast off once and for all. To infinity and beyond! With the 2 introductory levels under our belt, it's time for the first boss level of the game. These are smaller encounters focused solely on one big bad enemy to defeat that Traveler's Tales considers a step above the mini-bosses in the normal levels. In Bombs Away, we're stuck in a single fenced-in yard with no exit. As we wander forward into this arena, a giant biplane flies in to jump scare us. The plane will circle over you for a while and kind of dive bomb you while dropping some sort of harmful liquid. Is it water? Acid? Alcohol? Who knows, but it hurts. I guess that's another game theory for you, MatPat. Like every other boss we faced, the goal is to hit the plane with 3 green laser bolts, or a ton of red laser bolts if you hate yourself. Hitting a random laser shot at this point in the fight is possible, but way more difficult to manage due to the plane's constant movement. After a short period of flying around overhead, he will fly out to the other side of the yard. This is the time to strike. If we go into first person now, we'll be ready to lock on, and the plane will fly straight at us from one of the 2 far corners of the fence, making it easy to line up the shot. Hit the boss 3 times the same way, and we'll be rewarded with a boss defeated screen after Buzz flies out of the level. Bigger bosses like these aren't exactly anything super special when compared to the others, but the way this fight was designed wouldn't have worked well outside of this specially designed area, which is why it makes sense to give it its own level. Aside from that, these segments just break up the pace a bit and add some variation to the course of gameplay. Boss levels also function as gates of sorts to block progress if you haven't already collected enough tokens in the levels before it. For example, you can't even enter Bombs Away unless you've collected 3 tokens in either Andy's house or Andy's neighborhood. The next level is probably my favorite in the entire game, to be honest with you. Construction Yard doesn't even have any real basis in the source material, but it shines all the same. Starting out, we can choose to go pretty much anywhere, which is of course true of the other 2 levels we've already played, but those levels started you in very specific areas that somewhat led you in a direction. Here, you're just plopped down with no walls or boundaries and told to go. If you head to the right and avoid the space laser pigeon, you'll find the little tyke foreman who needs you to collect his 5 workers. As per usual, you'll find these guys strewn throughout random areas of the level, such as on a filing cabinet in the massive trailer that the little tyke foreman is hanging out beside. In said trailer, you'll find another floor covered in toxic gluck of some kind, and a paint puzzle up on the counter beside the cabinet. I use the term puzzle very loosely here, because if you have so much as a kindergarten level education, it should be smooth sailing. The goal is to push the paint can under the nozzles for different primary colored paints, and stomp on these buttons to pour paint into the can. Then you combine 2 of them and make one of the colors posted on the wall to the left. Once you've mixed the desired color, you just push the can under the image of the one that you made, and the corresponding light will turn on as the can magically empties to start the next mixture. It's super simple, but I enjoyed this one a lot as a kid, which is odd considering I'm pretty colorblind. Back outside in the opposite direction as before, Ham is on top of a piece of yellow machinery that you can get to by pushing the cinder block up against a nearby wheelbarrow. Across from Ham and under the massive tower of red girders, Slinky is sitting in the middle of a still wet cement foundation, on the only part of the cement that is dried, apparently. If you're already building as much of a structure as they have on a wet foundation, you're probably in for some trouble. But hey, Jenga's fun. Slinky will challenge you to collect 5 wrenches around the pool of cement within 50 seconds. You would think that this would be a breeze, considering the boundary of the challenge is pretty small. But between the trudging through the gray goop and my aforementioned crippling colorblindness, I always had trouble with this. Once you've memorized where each wrench will be, as I have today, it's no problem. I think part of the reason I always missed one as a kid was that I hated time limits in any game I played. Numbers counting down always caused turmoil in my soul, and I typically cracked under the pressure. Now time for the main event. There's another boss fight waiting at the top of the skyscraper, but getting to him will be the biggest challenge so far, dethroning the tree in Andy's neighborhood. The first big step is to get onto the structure in the first place, and to do that, you'll climb onto the yellow bulldozer. Inside there's a switch that when ground pounded will move the arm of the machine down for a few seconds so that you can get into the bucket and then be lifted up to a protruding girder. This process can be glitchy and often takes me a couple of attempts to get right. Oh look, I broke it. I usually just jump through the front window though, rather than leaving the bulldozer entirely and circling around. From here, we follow the path that the girders provide, avoiding obstacles like these oddly out of place hydraulic presses, or the seemingly molten hot bolts raining down from nowhere and bouncing around. After all of that nonsense, there will be a switch with the familiar green arrows indicating that you should stomp on it. These switches are a lifesaver, and you will not want to miss them. There's one at the end of each tier of the structure, and flipping the first switch unlocks an elevator platform that will take you back up to the end of the floor you've already completed, if you were to fall off at some point, which is likely. Turning the next switch on will let the elevator reach the next floor, and so on and so on. One reason these are important is even if you make it to the top in one go, you can't fight the boss without the item that Mr. Potato Chip will give you for returning his eye. And his eye is located on the structure near the third elevator switch, so you'll have to climb most of the tower and then backtrack down to the office building. The new power-up this time is the disc launcher. This is a homing attack that can damage certain enemies throughout the game that lasers bounce off of. One such enemy being the boss we are about to face. Collecting one pickup will give you 10 shots, and you can stack up to 30 shots in total, meaning that you probably want to sit there and wait a while to collect more when it respawns before you run off. Great! Arbitrary standing around. So with the disc shot in tow, we climb back up the tower using the elevator, and then we make our way to the roof where the quote-unquote jackhammer boss is waiting. This fight is basically run away as fast as possible, then turn around and spam the disc launcher at him until he gets close again. Rinse and repeat. Well, it's not quite that simple, I suppose. He also launches some of those blazing bolts at you no matter how far away you are. And running away sounds easy enough, but more times than not when I spun around to shoot him, he was right there to jump scare me. Not to mention that as you run around, it's not unheard of that one bad move could send you flying off the building, forcing you to start the fight over from square one. Realistically though, the only issue I usually encounter is running low on discs, but there are several of the pickups around the area, so it's not a real issue. Just keep running and shooting, and he should explode pretty quickly. The real question is, can you collect the coin that he drops before it disappears? After defeating the jackhammer boss, we want to make sure to check out this crane arm thing that's hanging off the side of the building, which doesn't really make sense. Why go over here? Well, for one, there's a tyke worker jumping around on the edge, but more importantly, this is the best part of the level, getting to leap off the building into a free fall, and miraculously, not splatting into the ground. So by now, you might be starting to see that there's an obvious pattern to how they developed this game's challenges. In every explorable level, you need to collect 50 coins and 5 of some kind of toy, whether it be sheep, army men, little tykes, or a number of others as we move forward. Then there will be some kind of race. In the first 2 levels, it's a traditional race against RC, but then in Construction Yard, or other future levels, it could be a race to collect 5 items in a given space, or a different kind of race against another random character. There's also always some kind of puzzle or platforming challenge. In Andy's house, we had to get to the box shelf, and then push the platforms into place. In Neighborhood, we blew up the ducky to get to the token above the pool. And in Construction Yard, it was mixing paint with primary colors. Finally, we always face a boss character of some kind. Maybe getting to them is simple and straightforward, like the robot in the attic, or maybe it's the biggest challenge of the level, like climbing the tree or the skyscraper. In some levels, you'll need to find one of Tater Guy's parts to unlock a new power-up. And after every 2 levels, there will be a dedicated boss level that functions as a progression gate, where you'll fight a more complex enemy. By definition, this game is formulaic. Some will count it as a strike against the game, and they certainly did back in the day. But personally, I don't think it's a bad thing. While the core idea for challenges don't change, the execution is always a little bit different. And frankly, I find it almost comforting to have a general idea of what I should be looking out for, especially in the later areas that can get a bit more complex. The variety of the game is in the environments themselves, which change how each challenge plays out. Alleys and Gullies takes us to the dark and gloomy streets of whatever city Toy Story is supposed to take place in. Heading straight forward, we bump into Mother Duck, and yes, you guessed it, she's missing 5 of her baby ducks that Buzz is asked to find. However, you aren't going to want to do this on your first playthrough. You see, a large chunk of this level is inaccessible until very late into the game, because without Potato Scalp's grappling hook power-up, we can't climb the fire escapes up to the gutter. This is where 2 of the 5 ducks are hiding, and also where you'll find a room with the boss. I get what they were trying to do with this, adding a little incentive to come back to levels you've already been to. That being said, this doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it's pretty pointless and frustrating in the grand scheme of things. By the time you would be able to go back and complete Alleys and Gullies, there's no genuine need to. The most tokens you'll ever need in the game is 40 out of 50, so 2 aren't going to make a big difference unless you're going for 100% completion. Aside from that, there's no indication that I've noticed telling you that you can't collect all 5 ducks until you come back with the grappling hook. So you'll likely have gone to the trouble of collecting the other 3, which are some of the hardest of these types of collectibles to get in the entire game. One of them is simple, hiding at the back of the marketplace area in a ditch full of water. But there's another one that I could never seem to get to as a kid, on the other side of this section, on top of an awning. You have to make some pretty precise jumps using the umbrellas to get to this guy, and it always takes me several tries. The same can be said of the 3rd duck hiding on the opposite side of the level in the titular gully. This water-filled ravine plays out a bit like Frogger, and you have to time your jumps from the various boxes, planks, and lily pads just right to get all the way across to this hole in the left corner, housing the duckling. Or if you actually want to complete the challenge after coming back later, you'll have unlocked the previously mentioned rocket boots, which will let you zip across the surface of water with ease, essentially removing any challenge entirely. So I don't think the duck collection challenge was designed super well. But what about the rest of the tokens? Well, once again, Ham will want 50 coins, and he'll be waiting under an umbrella in the market. Collecting 50 coins in total upon your first visit will be much more difficult given your limited access, but it's 100% doable. As a kid, I remember struggling finding enough coins before getting the grappling hook, but as an adult, I did it no problem. So I was just stupid, I guess. In the same market, you may have taken note of the floating balloon that currently isn't very helpful. It's meant to carry Buzz over to a token, but of course, it's rarely ever that easy. You'll have to use a series of boxes, tables, and shelves to make your way past a new shield-wielding Zurg bot that's blocking the way, so that you can press a big red button and turn on a fan. This fan will now blow the balloon over to the prize, on top of a trash can no less. Back in that flooded gully at the center of the water, there's a platform where Slinky will challenge you to collect 5 bones before time runs out. This race is probably the easiest out of all of them, frankly. All you have to do is know how to jump out a little and land where you just jumped from. And like I said, that's not hard. If I were the designers, I would have moved the bones further out and forced the player to navigate the floating objects to get them all. It would have been tough, but way more satisfying. At this point, we would have to pause and hit exit level because there's nothing more we can do. But for the sake of the video, let's quickly discuss the boss. Once you have the grappling hook, we can go into first person and use these red X points to zip up from place to place. Climbing up the fire escapes requires some pretty pinpoint movement because the railings you're traversing are very small. I don't recall this being very difficult with the PlayStation joystick, but with an original N64 controller, you can imagine the struggle. At times, you'll need to use the power lines as zip lines to get across to the opposite building. We've done stuff like this before in earlier levels, but this time there will be jolts of electricity that will knock you off if they touch you. This means that we need to grab on at just the right moment, otherwise you'll be sorry and likely have to start over from the bottom. Once you make it up to the gutter, there will be a small opening at the end that leads to the Clown Top boss. So, to be perfectly honest, I, to this day, don't really understand how you're properly supposed to do this fight. He can be hurt with the laser, and there's a few poles around that you could climb onto, and also an air conditioner over there that you could maybe stand on to avoid the boss and shoot him from afar, but personally, I just kind of chaotically shoot him, or use the spin attack that I've failed to mention until now, and try to hurt him more often than he hurts me. And I mean, that seems to work. It's a messy fight, and there's no real strategy to it, but hey, we got our token. Oh boy, time for another boss level. I hated slime time as a kid. This was because I just couldn't figure it out for the life of me. The arena this time is one of the alleys from the previous level, blocked off with a bunch of trash. You'll notice a tiny trash can sitting in the center of the area, looking super out of place. That's because this is the boss itself. Obviously. You would be forgiven to assume that this boss would be defeated in the same way as all the rest. That was the assumption that caused child me to get stuck on this level all those years ago. Shooting a single green laser bolt does next to nothing to this viscous fellow, which just didn't really make sense to me. It had been how I hurt every other boss in the game, so how else was I supposed to hurt this grimy guy? Well, I usually just gave up and started the game over. This was before my family ever had a computer and internet access. But I do remember an occasion or two where my uncle was around and he tried to help me figure it out. Eventually, he was able to beat the boss for me. But even then, I don't know how he pulled that off, because, well, he technically did it wrong. What you are supposed to do to damage Oscar the Goop is rapid fire your laser into him until he shrinks down into his trash can body. After doing this once, he'll expand in size, and you'll need to do it several more times. And the last phase is so difficult to do with your standard red laser that the game knows this and gives you one of the green laser power-ups to finish the trash monster off. Where the main challenge comes in is when he interrupts your laser blasts by leaping over you multiple times as you're trying to shrink him down. Then he'll also shoot a bunch of green sludge attacks that chase you around. How my uncle had thought he had done it at the time was running under the boss right as it jumped, then spinning around and shooting him right as it landed. How I assume he must have actually done it was that he timed his green laser blast just perfectly enough to shrink the slime down. I guess? I'm still not exactly sure how that was possible, but I watched him do it myself. Once you know how to properly damage him, the confrontation is pretty enjoyable, and I appreciate the attempt at variation. But from what I can tell, there's nothing in the game that explains how you need to shrink him down, and I'm pretty sure it's the only enemy in the game that you hurt this way. So, it could be argued that it's not the best design, seeing as it was probably more confusing to more kids than not. After fighting literal garbage, Buzz and the gang finally make it to Al's Toy Barn. It's weird to say, but toy stores aren't really even a thing in 2024, at least not like they were back in the day. This level is pretty chaotic, and there's stuff to do all over the place in a fairly small space, much like an actual toy store. A perfect example of said chaos would be down the aisle to the left of the starting area. This stretch is fundamentally an obstacle course, and there are immediately a bunch of basketballs, hula hoops and such coming at you as you make your way through the spokes of the bike wheels that are blocking the way. You have to admire the attention to detail with all the made-up toys lining the shelves throughout this area. Halfway through the hallway of madness, Mother Chicken is waiting for you to bring her 5 chicks. Man, it's crazy how all of these toys just so happen to be missing exactly 5 other toys. Unfortunately, this task is another victim of backtracking, and can't be completed until near the very end of the game. There's one chick that can only be found using a hover boot power-up on top of the mountain of boxes in the warehouse. And just like in alleys, you probably wasted a lot of effort before realizing this. Oh well. Father Chicken is at the back of the hallway between the warehouse and the office, and he'll offer you a time limit to reach an egg on a shelf at the front of the store above the hay bale ride. The first time he requests you do this, the only reward at the end is a chick, which also kind of implies that he kidnapped his own child from his wife. I guess the chicken family divorce isn't going so well. If we come back after rescuing this poor child, his father will lower the time limit and put a Pizza Planet token in the egg instead. This race is another Rube Goldberg-esque obstacle course where we get to ride the skateboard to bounce off of a trampoline, onto a shelf, then zipline to the cracked egg. The zipline can also be used to get Sputterman's arm, and if you bring it to him at one of the front checkout stations, the rocket boots are finally unlocked from all the way back in Andy's neighborhood. In the toy barn, they're only used to cross the checkout area after turning the hay bale ride on, so that you can launch yourself from a cart in order to bounce from the ride to a chick on some gumball machines across the way. Technically, this could even be done without the rocket boots entirely, but I got stuck trying to do so and had to restart the level, so I don't recommend that strategy. In the office, Ham is up on the desk. And then on the other side of the room, there are some locked filing cabinets that you need to shoot with the disc launcher to open. Then the drawers can be used as platforms to get to the token up above. In the warehouse with that last baby chick, you can still get up to certain parts of the boxes without the hover boots. And this is where you'll find the entrance to the boss area tucked away. Oh boy, more green goop. The dinosaur boss, like the clown top, doesn't have a great definitive approach to defeat him. All he really does is walk at you and breathe fire while you try to avoid the sludge on the floor. And all that you can really do differently is make sure that you have the disc launcher power-up or the green laser power-up. Not that this fight isn't possible without either, it's just the easiest method. Al's Spaceland is a bit strange to me. There's obviously several levels that aren't based on anything that's in the movie, but this one seems almost more out of place, because it takes plot elements from the movie and sticks them in a separate toy store right next door, that Al also apparently owns.
That's right, folks. Longtime owner Mr. Krabs is opening a new restaurant called the Krusty Krab 2.
As odd as it is, I love this level. Maybe because it reminds me of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. I have to wonder if they wanted to do a Pizza Planet level, but couldn't because it wasn't included in the sequel. I don't know. In most of the levels during this game, the biggest test of your ability is getting to the boss. Spaceland flies in the face of that, putting a hanging starmobile right above where we begin that when climbed will lead you right to the boss. The Buzz Lightyear Buggy Boss. I was the true villain all along. So this is obviously a reference to the second Buzz in the movie that traps Andy's toy in a box and leaves him on a shelf. That scene always triggers panic inside of me. My guess as to why they put this Buzz Boss in a buggy is because it would have been way more difficult and time-consuming to program a Shadow Link-esque mirror character. His attacks consist of driving into you, launching homing rockets at you, and shooting his own laser blasts. Buggy Buzz won't really give you any kind of opening, so the best thing the player can do is make sure to grab the laser power-up in the opening room before jumping into the arena, and then chaotically spam him until he dies. This is the pro strat. I'm a pro gamer. After climbing back out with our prize, there's a lot more space-themed fun to be had. There's a mothership that will ask us to find 5 of the famous Toy Story LGMs. You've probably already collected the one that was hanging on the mobile, and the rest are just kind of sitting around on various boxes and shelves. Trust me, you'll know when one is nearby. Moving along the other way and down one of the massive Buzz and Zurg-filled hallways, the walls themselves will shoot lasers at you. They put a cosmic shield here to try to let you avoid the attacks, but it's kind of pointless, since there are several instances where you need to be able to jump, like when you hit the giant wall of boxes blocking the way. At the end of this bullet-hell death trap, Ham is hiding out back here. All of that trouble? For Ham? How the frick did he even get back here? Somehow I can't imagine him jumping across gaps and dodging lasers. There's a second, less treacherous hallway next door, where you'll race a flying saucer to the end. The twist this time around is that it's a zipline race. You'll have to stay on the ropes till the very end, and that may sound easy, but you're also jumping from rope to rope as you go, and the timing can be tricky. Infuriating at times, in fact. But if you reach the checkered shelf before the UFO, well, you know what happens. Alright, what's left? Oh, you know, just one of my favorite parts of the entire game. In the back corner of the store is the arcade, and who doesn't love a classic arcade? The arcade machines, stools, and drink cups serve as a bit of a platforming challenge to get to the green claw machine in the corner of the room, or to the top of the ball pit. If we leap across the said ball pit and slide down the pole inside, we'll find one of the LGMs, and also just have a good time. The claw machine is simple, but I love the concept of it. Press the red button to start, then line up the claw horizontally, then line it up vertically to catch the Pizza Planet token prize, and drop it down the prize chute onto the floor. So why is this arcade one of my favorite spots in the game? You get to play a claw game and jump around in a ball pit. The real question is, why don't you love it? Toy Barn Encounter is an interesting concept for a boss level, taking one of the standard robot laser pigeon enemy things and then sliding the size meter up by 100. Then another interesting element that they added is that before you can deal significant damage to the boss, you have to destroy the waves of smaller enemies that pop out of one of the tentacle pods each time you shoot the bird. Sure, it's not difficult to destroy these enemies you've been fighting over and over at this point, but it's still a neat idea and serves as a bit of a last hurrah for some of these Zurg-themed robot enemies from the earliest levels, because from here on out, you won't really find them in any of the forthcoming levels. I believe the laser bird and the shield guy appear 1 or 2 more times in the following level, but the rest go AWOL after this boss fight. Once all of the tentacles are destroyed, it's a simple matter of shooting the boss with green laser blasts and avoiding the bird's own laser. Elevator Hop might just be the least interesting level in the game, at least aesthetically. In this one, you're exploring the vents and elevator shafts of Al's apartment building, just like in the movie. It makes sense that it's here, and it's not designed poorly, I just find it boring. Ham is near the start, on top of some electrical equipment in an incredibly hazardous room. To get to him, we have to swing from pole to pole without being shocked, and if the player falls, there's an electrified puddle waiting below. Most people won't come to Ham until they're about ready to move on to the next level, but perhaps you'll want to grab Tuber Skull's shoe and a baby mouse that's crawling on the wall, both of which you get to by platforming across the tops of the scary generators. What do you need the mouse for? I have no idea, I've never seen anything like this in the game, so it's super random and out of place. But the shoe will be used to unlock that grappling hook power-up that you're supposed to take back to Alleys and Gullies. You'll also need it to traverse the vents and get to the control room using the red X grappling points. When you do make your way up through the vents to the control room, fighting robots and snakes along the way, there's a very familiar sight to the left of the entrance, a stompable switch that when activated opens up a shortcut. Now, if you fall back to the bottom somehow, you can always take this fan back up without any hassle. In the control room, Mother Mouse is waiting for us on the floor, and she wants you to bring her 5 of her lost baby mice. Oh, that's what these mice are for. I'm glad they told me. Well, there's actually a mouse on the ceiling in this very room. Just climb on top of the desk and hop up to get him. And hop up to get him. Just hop up to get him. Okay, this time for sure, just hop up to get him. Just hop up and get him. Speed running. Ha! Nailed it. To open up the gate on the wall beside Mother Mouse, we need to use this switchboard console thing and stomp on the buttons in a certain pattern to line them up. I've got to be real again, I have no idea how to reliably do this. Typically, I just end up pressing them randomly for a few minutes until something happens. It's not that I couldn't use an actual strategy to figure it out and genuinely solve the puzzle, I just don't need to. I mean, my method works, so... Opening up this doorway will grant you a token, and now you've entered the elevator shaft where there are different colored platforms that move up and down asynchronously. The trick here is to time when you jump onto the platforms, so you can move across to the other elevator and get higher up until you reach the top. There are 2 different missions that this gives you access to. Through an opening on one side of the shaft, there's a race that Father Mouse challenges you to, where Buzz will actually try to slide down the vents faster than the token itself. The hardest part here is making sure you don't fall down a few vertical vents below and have to start all over at the bottom of the level. Other than that, it's mainly just a matter of getting to the end and collecting the token. On the opposite side from where Father Mouse is, you'll fly up using another fan to battle the Spider Gunro boss. Wow, that's quite the name. Apparently Gunro is a Japanese term that roughly means path of war. Or if you ignore the part that refers to a path or road, you would just see a bunch of definitions referring to military, army, battle, etc. Basically, the name indicates that we're in for a fun time. This is another mini-boss fight, like everyone we've done since Construction Yard really, that feels almost entirely chaotic to me. The spider will float around at times to get closer to you, it shoots balls of web everywhere that splatter on the floor and create traps, and oh yeah, there's an actual flamethrower on its back that you'll probably want to avoid. The environment is very small, with a hole in the center that you can fall through, and the floor itself is made up of fans that periodically switch on to interrupt what you're trying to do and spin you around in the air. The only real strategy I can find is, yet again, spam the evil creature with green lasers and hope it dies first. Words to live by. Now that we've braved the terrors of the elevator shafts, we make our way into Al's penthouse. Typically, you would think an apartment is the least interesting environment for a video game level, but Al's is an exception, because it's Wild West themed. Right away in the foyer, Bullseye will take Slinky's place and challenge you to collect 5 horseshoes in the living area before time runs out. How does he know who Buzz is already? Oh, also, better question, how is he speaking? So finding all of these stupid horseshoes always takes me like 10 tries, no matter how many times I've played this game over the years. The color blindness certainly didn't help again, but they also clearly wanted this one to confuse you a bit more compared to the others, because Traveler's Tale stuck these horseshoes in weird and easy to miss spots. In the kitchen, Jessie is on the island and wants Buzz to find her 5 missing critters. There is no scientific explanation for what these critters are. Part rabbit, part koala, maybe, and of course, part SpongeBob. I'd know that mouth anywhere. Also, why is it that Bo Peep and Jessie were both found in the kitchen? Are they trying to say something? Back in the living area, there was a locked cabinet in the TV stand. Shooting it open reveals a secret passageway to the most mystical and magical place in the entire game, Al's bathroom. Ham is trying to take a bath in the tub while he waits for his stupid coins. But little does he know, we're about to drown him once and for all by hitting the button by the faucet. Unfortunately for Al, the tub might have overflowed a little bit. But fortunately for us, now we can use the floating sponges as platforms to get to the sink. Ah, these must be the critters' parents. Turning on the sink and then the shower will flood the room more and more until you can reach one of the critters. As a kid, I really enjoyed this room because I found the idea of ruining this man's house by filling the entire thing with water hilarious. Unfortunately, as soon as you walk back into the rest of the house, the water automatically drains away. In Al's very grown-up looking bedroom, there's a train track puzzle that lines the perimeter of the room. The goal here is to stop the train at the end of the track so that you can push a box up against his train-themed bed, because Al is a man, dang it, and get the token on top. If you try to move the box to the end without stopping the train, you'll be in for a rude awakening, because the train will eventually stop you in your tracks, and you'll have to push the box all the way back before continuing. The key to getting the locomotive to the end is the switches on the track that will change the direction of the train's path. Solving the puzzle is really just a matter of trial and error, while trying your best to predict where the train needs to go next. More times than not, when I'm flipping switches and trying to figure it out properly, I realize that I've already solved it by accident, and I was waiting around a bit for nothing. This whole puzzle is made extra frustrating by the cannon on top of the bed that constantly fires at Buzz until you can reach a self-destruct button and blow it up. These cannons are actually in every other room as well, which is a bit of a blemish on the entire level, but hey. At least it adds some more difficulty, I suppose. Down the hall from the bedroom is the Woody's Roundup collection room from the movie. After climbing various shelves and display cases, you can jump into a little western diorama where we have a good old-fashioned duel with the gunslinger boss. Of course, this little arena is too small for the fight to be all that complex. He will simply move forward and shoot his revolvers at you while you unload on him with the laser until Buzz actually murders him. This town really wasn't big enough for the two of us. The next boss level takes us back to the elevator shafts to face the most ultimate enemy so far, the evil Emperor Zurg. Can I just take a second to say that Zurg was such a cool character growing up, and I am so disappointed how they ruined him in the Lightyear movie. It's really unfortunate. Well, anyways, in the game, the real Buzz has to take him down instead of the stupid one and wrecks his tail. Another tangent, when you first spawn into the deep, dark heart of this apartment building, this is what you hear. Yeah, that makes sense. Zurg is a tricky beast. It's immediately made clear that he's invulnerable to lasers, but since this is a major boss level, you won't be able to find a power-up like the disc shot. The only option we're left with is to get up close to him and use the spin attack. It's not that easy, of course, because Zurg can float around and avoid the spin move more times than not. He'll also launch an onslaught of homing attacks with his yellow ball launcher. To avoid these, you can try to dodge them the old-fashioned way, or deflect them with the same spin move. Each spin attack only takes away a small fraction of Zurg's health, so we have to hit him a lot before he finally stumbles into the abyss below, to go play catch outside.
Good throw, son. That's my boy. Go long, Buzzy.
Airport Infiltration brings Buzz and the gang to a sprawling airport for the last stretch of our search for Woody. This time you're dropped at the bottom of the baggage check area, and after fighting off some snakes and men with guns, we have to make our way up the conveyor belts by bouncing off of various pieces of luggage. I find it kind of easy to get lost in this level at times, but after a little exploring, Ham can be found on top of some security monitors in this area, screaming for his 50 coins as always. I thought we drowned him. After heading through the opening to the next room, there are several different ways to go. In the room to the left, there's a mountain of luggage that's currently impossible to climb to the top, and Mr. Potato Head is nearby in desperate need of help. This time he is missing. In the other room across the way, there are a bunch of disassembled plane pieces strewn around. And in the corner, the little tyke pilot is hoping you'll find his 5 missing passengers. Unfortunately, to find a couple of said tykes, as well as Mr. Potato Head's and another Pizza Planet token, you'll have to climb the tower of plane parts. I say unfortunately because trying to do so always makes me want to rip all of the hair out of my skull. I know. I probably just suck at video games, but I have literally spent hours at a time trying to grab onto the ledges of this plane and get to the top without falling off. I just fall and fall and fall and fall, and then I give up and come back, and then I fall some more. Speedrunning! If you do manage to get at least halfway up, you'll find the and when you bring it back to Potato Head, he'll unlock the hover boots in exchange for the mouth. Using these, we can float upwards for a short period of time, which helps us to traverse the rest of the broken plane, and also allows us to climb the aforementioned luggage pile and begin the looming boss battle up above. Stinky Pete, the prospector himself, is waiting up on another conveyor belt, and he is relentless. Stinky Feet never once takes a second to breathe, and just whacks his pickaxe into the ground over and over, sending out shockwaves in whatever direction he's facing. Lasers are useless, so the only means of stopping this homicidal old man is getting up to him and hitting him with Buzz's wings. There's no real way to avoid damage, you just have to absorb it and probably lose a life while hitting him over and over until he falls over. This isn't anything like the movie. The last token to get in this level can be found down below, back in that central room from before. The most iconic and unforgettable toy, Rocky Gibraltar, will challenge you to another collectathon race, gathering 5 weights in 60 seconds throughout not only this room, but the 2 adjacent rooms as well. It can be tough to find them all on the first pass, especially since the area is so big, but after a few tries, it's not that hard. And now in Tarmac Trouble, we move outside of the airport in a last-ditch effort to save Woody before the plane can carry him off forever. This environment stands out from the rest because of just how open it is. Rather than very clear segmented rooms or yards, the tarmac is one massive space that uses numbered buildings along the edge to ensure the player doesn't get lost, and to indicate where there are things to do. Because this space is so big and open, the devs have scattered rocket boot pickups throughout to help you get around a little bit faster. In Zone 3, we meet yet another little tyke, very literally dubbed the Airport Tyke. This time, and for the final time, you'll need to bring him 5 missing pieces of luggage. Luggage, I hear you say? That's not a toy. Oh, don't worry. This luggage has a face and bounces around. The sheer size of the map means that this particular toy hunt probably takes longer than usual. Over in Zone 5, Ham is all by himself. And you know, sure, throughout this whole adventure, he's forced us to pay him hundreds of coins to try and save Woody. He has threatened us over and over until we paid up. But at the end of the day, his Pizza Planet tokens helped us get here to the finish. And isn't that what it's all about? If we act quickly, we can abandon him here at the airport. At the center of the area lies a maze of green slime, and Slinky is waiting in the middle of said maze. Instead of racing to collect 5 items, Slinky got creative here at the end of the game. This time, he challenges you to get through the maze within the time limit, without touching the green edges, and without jumping at all. I really wish we had seen this type of thing once or twice more in the earlier levels, because I think it's a really neat idea to take away the player's ability to jump and still traverse an obstacle. It's a clever touch. Next to Slinky at the center of the maze, there's a flagpole that when climbed will help us jump to the wing of the plane that drives around the level in a circle. Besides the fact that there's a piece of luggage up here, we also need to use the plane to reach other areas, such as Zone 1. This building has a helipad on top, but the helicopter floating above it doesn't seem to know it's safe to land. Since this copter is carrying a Pizza Planet token, we'll need to use this last puzzle to lower it down and grab it. The goal of this puzzle is to light up all of the colored bulbs within 3 moves. It's mainly a matter of trial and error, but much like the puzzle in Elevator Hop, I mostly end up just slamming buttons over and over randomly until the right thing happens. Now, in a level all about planes and other such air travel elements, you might wonder what the boss could be this time around. Could it be a pilot? A stewardess? Maybe an angry TSA agent? Nope, it's a blacksmith. This makes perfect sense. This buffball boy only really has one attack. With the power of Thor, he smashes his little hammer down and creates a shockwave that functions like a homing attack. As far as I can tell, that's it. He is completely invulnerable to all lasers, and like the previous boss, you have to use the spin attack to hurt him. Honestly, he's basically just the Prospector again, but slower, and his attacks are a little bit more like the Slime Time boss. Once again, the fight amounts to a chaotic mess of Buzz and Blacksmith punching each other like Rock'em Sock'em robots until one of them dies. We shouldn't be surprised, I suppose, considering how weak all of the boss designs have been since the first chunk of the game. Speaking of weak boss fights, it's finally time for the final battle to save Woody so we can get back to Andy's room before the end of Cowboy Camp. For the first time in the whole game, Woody is here in the flesh, waving frantically for help in the plane's cargo hold. The Prospector returns from the dead after we had defeated him before, but now he's brought along some familiar mustache-faced friends. Baldi's Basics himself, the Blacksmith, again! And everybody's favorite cowpoke, John Marston, aka the Gunslinger boss. Unsurprisingly, there's no differences from before to how these characters attack. Now you just have to defeat them all again at the same time, which mostly means trying to dodge, or more likely getting hit over and over while you spam them as usual. Considering it's the final level, it's unfortunate that there wasn't more thought put into it. To be honest, there's not even a real reason to play this last level besides seeing the credits roll. If you were going for 100% completion, you technically already got it at the end of Tarmac Trouble with the last Pizza Planet token. Still, I suppose it's a nice way to punctuate our adventure and close the book on the game. So, it's pretty clear Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue has its flaws, mainly when it comes to a majority of the boss fights. Though, I think my biggest complaint about this game is the fact that grabbing the sides of ledges is harder than Dark Souls. Speedrunning! When all is said and done, it's easy to look past the issues and enjoy the game for what it is. It's not a sprawling 30-hour adventure, it's a fun little nostalgic 3D platforming collectathon. You can finish the game in its entirety in a few hours, so sometimes when I'm having a rough day, I'll boot up the N64 and relive a little childhood. The environments are well thought out and fun to explore. Maybe some of the power-ups are a bit pointless, but they add some nice variety to the adventure. The music is really good, even on the N64, at least in my opinion, and in a way, the game is just one big toy box with some creative enemies, great atmosphere, and neat little challenges to keep you engaged. Smaller games like this are a bit of a lost art form today, and that's unfortunate. Sure, indie developers got us covered with similar experiences, but it's sad that we don't see brands like Disney attempt anything like it anymore. If you want to try the game out for yourself right now, the PlayStation version is available digitally on PS4 and PS5. Even if it's not for you, maybe your kids will like it. I know when I was a kid, I couldn't get enough Toy Story. Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue's release was not as smooth sailing as you might think. The game's launch was actually mired in controversy, and not because of the typical gamer issues or quality of the title. Nope, this time, Traveler's Tales caused real-world outrage from the general public. Do you happen to remember this enemy character from later levels of the game, with the mustache, hat on his back, and rifle that he would shoot you with? As a kid, I thought it was honestly just a hunter with a gun, or like a park ranger or something? I don't know. Turns out, this guy was supposed to be a bandito character, an outlaw archetype of Wild West stories and films involving Mexico. If you want an example, look no further than the first Red Dead Redemption. Well, back in the day when the Disney game released, some adults saw this character and felt that he was an offensive Mexican stereotype.
More than 120 people gathered outside Activision's Santa Monica offices to protest what they deemed to be offensive content in Activision's Toy Story 2 PlayStation title. The peaceful demonstration was sparked by the appearance of a mustachioed Mexican bandito character that many found to be a mocking portrayal of Hispanic stereotypes. The character does not appear in Disney's Toy Story 2 movie. While the company has promised to alter the appearance of the character in a future mastering of the game, there are currently no plans to remove or amend copies already on the shelves. GameDeveloper.com, December 1999.
Overt ethnic stereotypes are supposed to be a thing of the past for Disney. Unfortunately for both Activision and the house that Mickey built, a character unique to the N64 game Toy Story 2, based on the popular movie from Pixar, is causing an uproar among members of Southern California's Latino community. This time, it's not necessarily for a negative portrayal of Mexican people. Instead, the people protesting outside Activision's headquarters say the fact that you have to shoot at and destroy a stereotypical Mexican character to advance in the game is the problem. One of the boss characters in the game comes dressed in simple peasant clothes and a bandolier strap to complete the familiar, though sometimes offensive, revolutionary look. The potentially disturbing image of Buzz Lightyear, the main character in the game, training his crosshairs on this boss character and firing lasers at him was enough to mobilize some parents and other concerned adults to action. Activision, the publisher of Toy Story 2, says it will begin producing copies of the game for all video game systems without the offensive boss character. Calls to Activision were not returned, so there's no official word on how soon the replacement copies will be available, how the offensive boss character's deletion will be handled in the game, or the reason for including a character in the game that wasn't in the film. A spokesperson for Disney did issue the statement. "We regret that a portion of this game was offensive. Unfortunately, there was a mistake made in its creation. We plan to change the character." Disney has put forth admirable effort to avoid offending ethnic minorities during their string of blockbuster animated films throughout the 1990s. Interactive entertainment products from Disney tend to follow the standards set by the successful films. In this case, the addition of a non-film character provided to be more of a problem than a quick solution. IGN, December 10th, 1999.
The Walt Disney Company has agreed to change a sombrero-wearing character in the Toy Story 2 video game because it offended some Hispanics. The decision was announced Thursday after a peaceful demonstration outside the Santa Monica, California headquarters of Activision, which produced the game with Disney. One level of the game features a villain with a mustache, bullet bandolier, and a sombrero, which Hispanic activists said was a Mexican stereotype. Players must shoot the symbol to advance to the next level of the game, said Oscar de la Torre, a counselor at Santa Monica High School. "We feel it's degrading, it's dehumanizing, it stereotypes Mexicans as villains," he said. "It's a virtual game of genocide the way we see it, because they're being ethno-specific." The character does not appear in the Toy Story 2 movie. The Chicago Tribune, December 10th, 1999.
While it's understandable that you wouldn't want the children of the day exposed to harmful depictions of stereotypes, there was clearly some misinformation that had been spread around about this situation at the time. This character is just a random enemy in a handful of levels, not a boss character like IGN reported. The quote in the Chicago Tribune article would lead you to believe that you must kill this character to progress in the game. But that isn't exactly accurate either. You can shoot them and get a coin, like any other enemy, or you can just as easily ignore them. They're fairly inconsequential. In later ports of the game, the gunman enemy was replaced with a stereotypical cowboy with blonde hair. If you're personally offended by this enemy's inclusion and are glad it was later removed, that's your right. Looking back though, I kind of think the whole thing was maybe blown a bit out of proportion. I don't think Traveler's Tales were trying to target or attack an entire group of people by including this likeness as an enemy in the game. My guess is that they wanted another Old West type of character for Al's Penthouse, and since the gunslinger boss already fit the cowboy villain motif, they chose to use another common Old West trope. I didn't even understand what he was until I read these articles, and like I said before, I thought he was a huntsman or something. Critical reception for Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue was mostly positive in the long run, depending on which port was being reviewed, though there were plenty of journalists that ripped the game to shreds.
Toy Story 2 wants to appeal to a broad range of gamers, not just kids. And this is obvious in its level design. One big surprise comes in the graphics department. The PlayStation version looks surprisingly better than even the N64 version. With movie license games, it's easy to assume that the PlayStation N64 trade-off, should both versions exist, will be graphics for the N64 and sound and FMV for the PlayStation. This is not the case. The PlayStation version actually has it all. The cameras presented a bit of a problem, however. When the active camera is agreeable, it's suspiciously good. But then, seconds later, you'll find yourself cornered in an alley, pushing a box next to a chair that you must jump on to leap onto a scale. That will in turn send you soaring into the air looking for the best place to land. This isn't fun with the camera whipping around you like a mosquito. Yet you've too much going on to manage your camera while you navigate your jumps, grabs, and leaps. It's certainly not the worst camera system out there, and you will get used to it, and probably settle on the active camera at some point, cursing your way through the game. The camera proves the game to be yet another notch away from being a kid's game. For a movie with generous voiceover already in the can, you'd expect an overload of catchphrases and one-liners in the licensed game. This is not the case. And Crystal Dynamics could learn a thing or two for Gex from this one. It's a simple model. Less is more. And the music? Toy Story music. Enough said. In the end, the game is good. Whether you've seen the movie or not, Toy Story 2, as a game, stands on its own. It's not complicated or sexy. It's just a fun, straightforward, non-linear adventure game with puzzle and platform elements. If you are a fan of the Pixar films, the game delivers what makes a movie come to life in video game format. The shortcomings are simply not enough to take away what is a rare breed of enjoyable, spirited, and surprisingly entertaining movie-to-video game effort. It's well worth a rental at least. Lauren Fielder, GameSpot, December 1999.
The problem with porting a game that wasn't very good in the first place? You just end up with a port of a game that wasn't very good in the first place. Oh sure, add some polish and pizzazz with that super console horsepower. Let the graphics stand out in their Google Gonal glory, and you might convince a few Dreamcast gamers that you've got an exciting adventure based on an exciting movie sequel. And certainly the kiddies are going to beg mommy for more buzz. All things buzz, buzz it is. But a game needs good gameplay in order to generate any kind of buzz amongst reviewers and genuine game fans. My, that was a weak pun. Weak. Well, so is this game. The bottom line, there's a better buzz waiting for you in a can of beer. Shaun Conlin, The Electric Playground, September 2000.
The path to infinite disappointment and beyond leads straight through the heart of the cutesy little third-person 3D platformer, Toy Story 2. Jumpy, jerky, and 7 kinds of flawed, this sad story clearly reeks, and the heady odor of a shoddy PlayStation to Dreamcast port should be enough to choke even the airtight space helmet-wearing hero Buzz Lightyear. The plot and characters come kicking and screaming from the brilliant Disney Pixar film, and you can expect to run into many of the movie's minor players, Mr. Potato Head, Slinky Dog, etc. While the familiarity is welcome, these bit characters only exist to bleed out annoying sound bites and challenge our hero to perform various tasks for, what else? Coins. 2 types of camera angles exist in Toy Story 2, passively putrid and actively terrible. Whichever option you select, the camera swings, jumps, and pans wildly whenever Buzz decides to, say, move. You constantly need to modify the view, and the problematic camera turns even the simplest task into a Herculean labor. Endless platforms await, as do hordes of toy robots to blast, and any appeal held by the characters or license is pretty much totally wrecked by the cliche play. Terrible draw-in, ultra-sensitive controls, and graphics that are barely better than the PlayStation version further damn this to the Isle of Misfit Toys. If you have any compassion as a parent, you'll keep your kids far away from Toy Story 2. The gameplay will give them nightmares. Bottom line, call this story a hack job. Greg Orlando, I can't even say Orlando, the free and the home of the brave. Greg Orlando, Next Gen Magazine, December 2000.
There are a lot more crazy reviews for this game, but I think you get the idea. I really don't think the PlayStation and N64 versions are all that different outside of music and cutscenes, and graphically, I would argue the PlayStation version looks stretched and weird, kinda like the PlayStation version of Glover compared to the N64, but to each their own. After Toy Story 2, Traveler's Tales went on to make a second Buzz Lightyear-based game focused on the Saturday morning cartoon, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. While I adore the show, I've never actually played this one, as I didn't pay much attention to PS1 games outside of what I was gifted. From what I can tell, it's very different from Toy Story 2, even though they were made back to back, though it does reuse many sound effects from its predecessor. If you can believe it, they then made another Toy Story game, Toy Story Racer. It seems that they also reused prior work from the other two games to make this kart racing entry. Over the years, Disney had become an incredibly important employer and partner for Traveler's Tales, so it's no surprise just how many Disney-themed games they were churning out at this stage and well into the future.
I think we understand how Disney works, and they trust us to get the games done to a high standard and on time. They need the product in the marketplace on time, and we've never let them or anyone else down. I think my favorite Disney license to date has been the Toy Story series. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
Disney wasn't the only company they were working with during that period of time though. Right around the turn of the millennium, Traveler's Tales started work on the first Crash Bandicoot title after Naughty Dog had moved on from Universal and gave up the property, The Wrath of Cortex. The game was originally going to be led by Mark Cerny, who had worked on every other Crash title prior and who is now famous for being the lead architect of the PlayStation 5. Traveler's Tales was hired as the development team working with Cerny to make the game happen, but Cerny and Sony had a falling out with Universal and he stepped away from the project. This left Burton and his team in a difficult situation. They now had to design and build a Crash Bandicoot game from the ground up all on their own, and they only had 12 months to do it. The title was originally going to be an ambitious leap forward for the series, with big open areas to explore, but the struggles behind the scenes forced them to go with a more by-the-numbers design for the game, and the results were largely underwhelming to fans and critics. It wasn't necessarily a bad game, but it didn't bring anything new to the series, and was just a very average platformer. This transitional period of mascot platformers is often regarded as the dark ages for the genre, at least when it came to characters like Crash, Spyro, and even Mario. I've mentioned this in previous videos. A couple of years later, they would develop another Crash game, Crash Twinsanity, and while it received the same middling reception from critics, fans seem to regard it much more fondly today than they do Wrath of Cortex. Before Crash Twinsanity though, Traveler's Tales created an original title that Burton had long dreamed of making a reality. Burton's ideas for this game would eventually become Haven: Call of the King. The roots of many of this game's design concepts come from his time playing Amiga games, such as the wireframe-styled Mercenary. Burton admired how this game apparently subverted the player's expectations of how big the boundaries of a game could be. He wanted to replicate this and combine it with a story that deeply resonated with him. What many may not know is that Jon Burton considers himself a Christian, and he had long been hiding nuggets of his Christian faith in the games that he worked on.
For the eagle-eyed Christian game players, Pugsy had a room with a Bible verse in huge letters, and Sonic R had the Christian Ictus fish symbol, like on the back of cars above the houses on the first track. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
As a side note, I remember hearing about this fish symbol hidden in Sonic R, and how weird and out of place gamers have thought it was over the years. It's amusing to now know exactly what that was all about. Burton would attempt to take these little Easter eggs one step further in Haven, and design the game's story after the Bible itself.
The game's storyline was written to be an allegory of the Christian gospel. As a Christian, I've always wanted to try and create a Christian game, but that is incredibly difficult as the whole basis of Christianity is for you to give your life to Jesus and trust and pray to God for help and guidance. That doesn't make for the best gameplay. Can you imagine? Press X now to let God finish the level for you. In games, you want to be the hero, and Christianity is all about humility, which is the opposite of you being the hero. However, C.S. Lewis wrote a popular story which was an allegory of the gospel called The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. He created a compelling story with proactive characters that also had a gospel message, so that's what I tried to do with Haven. Jon Burton, GameDeveloper.com, November 2006.
Another interesting tidbit about Haven is that the game was going to star the all-too-familiar creature from the Traveler's Tales logo. Over the course of revisions and development though, this was changed to a pretty generic-looking human. Burton has expressed his regret for this on his YouTube channel, and admits that he believes the game was ultimately the victim of design by committee, meaning too many people were involved and there was no clear vision in the end. The game sold poorly overall, and while Burton had planned to make a sequel, it never came to be. At this point, they kept chugging along, making the aforementioned Crash Twinsanity and another Disney Pixar game, Finding Nemo. And then, Traveler's Tales would make their biggest game yet, a game that marked a massive transition for the team that would ultimately change their identity and their future forever. But I think that's a story for another day. The journey that they were about to embark on deserves its own separate video. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss it. I think it'll be a fun one. Traveler's Tales might just be the most profound company I've covered to date. Their history is rich, and their early years have been incredibly fascinating to study. Their Toy Story 2 game was the first I ever got for my N64, and because of my propensity for licensed games, I've played many of their various titles throughout my childhood. Jon Burton is an incredibly talented man, and I believe his legacy will leave a lasting impact on generations to come. By no means were the games that he and his team made perfect. Many of them frustrated me to no end, but ultimately, they were fun and had a certain charm to them that has never fully been replicated. I'm excited to tell the rest of their story in the near future. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video even a little bit, please leave a like and share it with your friends. It would help me out a ton and make it easier for me to create videos like these on a much more regular basis. Make sure to subscribe for my next video coming very soon, and I'll see you all then. To infinity and beyond.